And so, David, you established the Center for Advancing Research and Solutions for Society about 4 or 5 years ago.
Yes.
And I think today we could talk about some of the goals that you have for the center and some of the remedies which I believe, and I think you believe, it offers to the state of the social sciences today.
Okay.
So innovation and specifically cars. Okay. That's my agenda.
Good.
So maybe you could talk to me a little bit to start with about your own sense of the state of sociology. What are some of the ways in which social sciences generally, but sociology in particular, needs to be looking to some new approaches in the coming 10 years?
Well, I think the situation in sociology is more or less endemic to the rest of social science, but the different disciplines, I think, manifest what I'm going to talk about somewhat differently by degrees. My concern with the social sciences is that probably for the period of the last 30 to 40 years have become increasingly more academic, more theoretical. And that, of course, is all to the good in one sense. It displays a good deal of intellectual liveliness. There are more paradigmatic confrontations, but they are at several steps removed from what I think are just important challenges in the world, the everyday world, that the social sciences, at least the academic social sciences, almost by definition, seem too remote from, less engaged than I think would be productive, both for the everyday world and for people who are confronted with problems like poverty and crime and racial conflicts, racial and ethnic conflicts. And I think lose an opportunity to really use the world as it exists as the matrix within which ideas, concepts, theories, ultimately perhaps even larger meta-theories, paradigms, really get formulated. And so it's that lack of engagement that had troubled me. I think there was a time, maybe at the beginning of the 20th century, when the disciplinary social sciences in the United States really took root. And, of course, within the early research universities that were being created in those early decades of the 20th century, were created with a sense that they were lenses of understanding of the social, economic, political worlds. But they were also tools that might be used, intellectual tools that might be used analytically to construct potential, if not solutions to those problems, at least to guide the public debates, the policies that could be formulated in a more informed, evidence-based way. Probably by mid-century, the social sciences overreached, a little bit like Icarus, coming to the sun too close and falling into the sea. And the sea that the social sciences fell into basically was back to the academy, to the walled cloister, to become more theoretical. It was politically safer there. They were Icarus-like in the sense that in some ways they promised too much of the kind of thing that I would today call for more of. Mm-hmm. And they became too political and too politicized in a moment during the war in Southeast Asia when American society was so rife with political contestation. And the social sciences were a big target as an engaged intellectual enterprise. So I think at the fall into the sea, the retreat from the world, in a sense, in my view, allowed the social sciences to gain some stature as intellectual, theoretical projects, substantially so. and to become more internally diversified with sub-theories, sub-fields, and so forth. But in that process, I think it, as a collective agenda, and I would target sociology as a principal example of this, just became too detached from my view. And so the idea for a center of the kind that I think we'll be talking about, Center for Advancing Research and Solutions for Society, was an effort to bring the social sciences back to a point of engagement without getting back into the political mess that we were in the middle of the 20th century.
Before we dive into cars, which I'm very interested in talking about, I wonder if you could give me a couple examples from earlier in the 20th century, pre-World War II, let's say, of sociology paradigms or schools which did have the kind of engagement that you're talking about.
Well, I think the Chicago School is a good example, where in a sense, the hurly-burly of the ethnic diversity of the city of Chicago, the politics of city government, the sheer growth of the city became a source of just enormously rich theoretical work. Criminology, basically, in this country was so heavily dominated by the use of Chicago and its problems, its dilemmas, as a focal point. In many respects, social ecology, the form of population studies that is as close to geography as you can get without calling it geography, call it geography or will, social geography, really had a major foundation in this country, in the city of Chicago. So I think of Chicago sociology and Chicago as a university and a place as interpenetrating, and it's a good example, in a sense, an early example of the kind of thing I think we ought to see more of.
I also kind of think of the Chicago School as having some of the theoretical eclecticism, the diversity, the willingness to look at different theoretical approaches in order to have the best understanding of a particular empirical problem.
I think that's exactly right. The other thing, it was one of the first really keep your toes to the fire efforts to start measuring things. Not only having crispness theoretically and diverse theoretical perspectives, and to use that diversity as a dialectic, but there was this whole other measurement thrust to become more empirical. And of course, as you well know, that became a very, very strong influence on American sociology and some of the other social sciences. Economics, of course, always has had that kind of empirical bent to it, though the empiricists in economics were often regarded as second cousins in the early period.
And that would be kind of larger scale sociological statistical description, but the Chicago School also did case study and kind of field work-based sociology.
Absolutely, and going back really into the settlement house movements, both in Chicago and New York and so forth, where they were really the first examples, in a way, of both trying to conceptualize, theorize, but also to measure. And that was the beginning of what became the social survey movement. And some might even say that was really the beginning of what became schools of public policy, became a place for public affairs to be formulated.
That's very interesting. So the Chicago School is a good example of a kind of theoretically eclectic, empirically driven, policy and problem driven kind of sociology in your mind.
Yeah.
Great, great.